Hello and welcome to another episode of Guru Gyan. My name is Sanjay Chakrabarti. I'm the founder of Tagit. Today's topic is coaching, and our guest today is a leading voice on the subject. She's an executive coach. She is a teacher at several of the top global business schools. She also runs her boutique consulting firm, True North, and she has written and authored the book called Coaching, The Secret Code of Uncommon Leadership. This is a book that has been praised across the board, right from Sheryl Sandberg to Nandan Nilekani. Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw has given the foreword, S. Ramodarai, and the list goes on. So, Ruchira, I'm absolutely delighted for you to having taken time and join this show.
Thank you. I'm even more delighted, or should I say privileged, that you selected me to be part of your Guru Gyan series. You know, I took the liberty of researching the series and I realized that the first one was with your dad, who is quite a luminary himself and an uncommon leader in his own right. So, you know, I do feel very privileged to be taking this series forward. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Ruchira. In fact, I came across your book through a friend who referred it to me. And I was absolutely fascinated at the various subjects that were covered, because in my professional life and now in the entrepreneurial journey, these were some of the questions that I found answers in the book, which has always been there, but I really didn't know where to go to get it. And that's the reason I thought it would be great to have you as a follow-up person on Guru Gyan.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
So let me, Ruchira, get into the questions directly. The first basic question before we get into more details, what's the difference between mentoring and coaching?
Sure. And, actually, it's a really good question to start or set the tone with, because it's asked very often and we continue to use these two terms rather interchangeably. Business schools, classrooms, at the workplace. So we often confuse a mentor that most of us have exposure to with a coach. And if you sort of think about it, it's a fairly basic difference. A mentor, by definition, is somebody who's older, who has a lot of influence, but could come from anywhere. Could be an ex-client, could be your parent. Think about an older person who's been there, done it, has been successful in his career or her career, and is someone who will counsel you and guide you. So their primary role is to tell you, this is how I did it, and this is how you could do it. Now, the difference between the coach is not guiding your career journey. The coach is guiding your current practice, right? So think of the coach as somebody who's with you on the football field, as opposed to the mentor who's probably watching it from the sidelines and then giving you, his or her wisdom, dispensing wisdom. A coach doesn't tell, a coach asks. So a coach will not give you the solution, will enable you to find a solution. So often these coaches come in the form of our bosses or our managers. These are people that see our practice day to day, that help us become a better version of ourselves by making us more capable, giving us more clarity, perhaps more self-consciousness, self-awareness, and also a lot more confidence to go forward. So it's here and now, whereas a mentor is essentially could be through your entire career trajectory.
Got it. So a related point, is it good to have a coach who has a direct influence on your career and remuneration?
So first things, what I should have said in the previous, when you asked me the previous question, is the two are not mutually exclusive. You can have both. Mm-hmm. In fact, as you go forward in your career journey, you can have a board of advisors. It could be a combination of mentors from different disciplines, different domains. And of course, having a coach is something that's what the book talks about. Now, one of the basic tenets of coaching is that it's a leader who's coaching you, right? This whole book is about the leader as coach.
Right.
Somebody who you work with or work for should really be the one making you a better version of yourself. It's about a leader today building that leader for tomorrow, right? And let's face it, that individual typically does have a say in your remuneration. And unfortunately, that's also the biggest reason why most managers don't coach. They believe their job is to manage and appraise as opposed to help you find your path. So they often end up giving you the answers as opposed to letting you find those answers. And that is the biggest challenge here. So a leader typically should have that, as you said, influence, but that shouldn't come in the way of coaching. And that's why we say wear different hats at different times. Be the instructor, be the teacher, be the manager, and be the coach when you need to be.
Got it. That's an excellent point. In fact, that leads me to the reality of the situation. And given your length and breadth of experience, not only working in India, but across the world, in today's day and age, when practically every second company is really focusing on a quarter to quarter journey.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of sense of I, me, myself. How do you really generate? Because it seems to suggest that you have to kind of get your leaders into the coaching framework. And when there is so much, and in your book, as you've defined this whole super chicken model, which I really kind of resonated with. How do you break this model? How do you break this shackle and have a long-term vision as far as the entire building the organization is concerned?
Sanjoy, the thing is, you still have to make your numbers, right? This whole model of leadership is not saying that you have to stop making those revenues or your targets quarter on quarter. What it's saying is taking your people along in the journey and making those targets. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. You can do both. You can reimagine a model of leadership where it's an enabling model of leadership, right? And for that, the focus has to be, of course, on building the business, on making the numbers, on being more productive. But can we cascade a culture of coaching? Whereas what that simply means is, can the leaders of today consciously build leaders for tomorrow, right? And that comes in many ways. Not everybody's intrinsically motivated. You and I could say, oh, I want to leave a legacy behind and it's fantastic. I spend a lot of my time having these conversations with my people. But not everybody in the organization across the board will be the same. Some of us have great coaches, leader coaches, and some of us have not had the pleasure of some fantastic coaches like I'm talking about. So what can organizations do to permeate a culture, as you were saying? It can come in several ways. You can start by looking at the architecture of your organization. And what I mean by that, let me just decode that. Your formal systems, your informal systems, how do you hire people? Are you only looking for people with the requisite experience and go-getters, or are you also testing them for those skills and aptitudes that make somebody a better leader? When you promote people, are you simply looking at achievement of targets, or are you seeing how much time they devoted to the development of their own people, their one-downs, and their organizations? Are we celebrating these individuals who are building other people? Right. Are we role modeling? As leaders, are we fantastic coaches? When you are great coaches, it sends out the right signal. And the book talks a lot about Satya Nadella. And the one thing that stood out for him was he is that role model. When he took on a very broken Microsoft, the first thing he did was he actually went about listening to everybody. So what is it that we can do differently, right? And the first sort of, I guess, the lesson in there was he listened. It was active listening. He absorbed a lot. He assimilated a lot. And then he came back and, after maybe a year of focus group discussions, etc., they've come up with this model, which is model coach care. So right. You be the role model, you coach your people, and you have to genuinely care for them, empathy. And they're actually evaluated on that. And this is across the board, across the globe. Every Microsoft employee who has people responsibility has to demonstrate these competencies, or they call it an excellence framework, actually, model coach care, right? So you have to embed it into the DNA of your organization. It's not enough to give people training or to say that coaching is important. That's fantastic. That needs to be done too. But to make it a reality in your organization, you have to go the extra step and truly embed it into the culture, or what I call the arc of your organization. Your architecture, the routines, your day-to-day conversations with people, how you interact with people, how you communicate, how you celebrate them, and of course, the culture of your organization.
Right. That's outstanding. And, I think the impact of that in the way Microsoft has really turned around from the time he's kind of taken over is I guess, apparent to everybody. So I guess the importance of coaching itself is a translation of that. So one of the questions, and I think you've already alluded to it, maybe you preempted that, but my question was that, so effectively coaching is going to be across the board. It's not that right at the top, at the CXO level, you need to build coaches. Given that's the situation, and you said right from the time of hiring, those are the skill sets that you need to kind of build in. Can everybody be a good coach? Can you be trained to be a good coach? And the example that I liked is one of my favorite cricketers is Sachin Tendulkar that you alluded to. Could you just kind of give your thoughts on, can everybody be a good coach? So that's the first question. Second question, a related one, is that you have a super performer. Say in this case, let's take Sachin Tendulkar, who is an outstanding individual performer, may not be the best coach in terms of developing other people because of various reasons, and we could talk about that. So in that situation, how do you get another leader being set up without really giving, in this case, say Sachin, the opportunity to perform and fail? Can you really take that in an organization setup wherein you basically say that your best performer is not a good coach, so let's not put him right up there as the CEO, but let's give him another path? So how does this all fill in? I understand the theory, but from a practical perspective, how does all this come together?
Oh, it's a great question, but it's actually a bit layered. The answer is not as straightforward as well. So let's unpack this thought, right? Let's focus on the first one, where you talked about Sachin has been perhaps the best individual performer that the cricketing world has ever seen. But we also know that the years of his captaincy are largely forgotten. In fact, those are probably the darkest times in an otherwise completely shining and stellar career. So somebody like Sachin Tendulkar, who's fantastic at his individual craft, but did not quite take that to his captaincy. Or I think in the book I've talked about Albert Einstein, who is great as a scientist, but when he tried to teach a class, there were no takers because apparently he was so scattered in the way he taught his class. Because now the problem often with geniuses, whether it's a Sachin or an Albert Einstein or many others like that, is that they're so focused on their craft. They're so good at what they do. It comes to them so intuitively. They find it hard to take others along in the journey. And there's an important lesson here for us to remember. Not all of these fantastic, stellar performers actually want to have the burdency of captaincy or administrative responsibilities. Not everybody wants to steer the ship or be the CEO or the head of a profit center. We mistakenly assume that your best performer will automatically morph into your best captain. And that doesn't happen. And that doesn't happen for a variety of reasons. In case of a Sachin, for instance, honestly, he didn't want the burdency. He didn't want the burden of a captaincy. But if you look at his biography, it was almost thrust upon him. And he also talks about, despite his best attempts, he didn't know what he was doing wrong. Now, remember, the best talent also needs to be nurtured and coached so that talent in turn can coach others. And if you look around you, often our best performers, whether it's in the world of cricket, in the world, other performing arts, or in the world, in the corporate world, they're not coached or nurtured because we just assume because they're so good at their craft, they will be absolutely stellar as captains or as leaders. And that doesn't happen. Right. So we have to, from the very start, gauge their interest, their passion, their desire to be leaders, whether they truly want to do it. And if they do, we also need to give them that coaching and that nurturing. And so that's one aspect of it. So back to your next question. Often what also happens is some of these superstar performers, they are so self-absorbed. They've always got a disproportionate amount of resources in any organization. Right. They're blue-eyed. They can do no wrong, right? And they have a very sort of misguided illusion about what leadership is, because they've always been so lauded, so applauded. Right. they don't know what it is to take others along in the journey. So for different reasons, not everybody becomes that fantastic leader, and by virtue of that does not coach. So in order to promote people to be that captain of the ship, you have to gauge for a few things. A, are they interested? Two, would they be happier being just individual performers focusing on their craft? Do they have the traits that make for a great leader? Can they take others along in the journey? Do they have the passion, to do this?
Right.
And when you decode all of that, that's when you decide. And you can have a great player become a great captain. You don't necessarily need to have your best player become your captain. I think that's what I was saying through that example of Sachin.
Great.
And we've seen that. We've seen that in a Dhoni and a Saurav Ganguly and a host of other captains who individually have not been the best players, but they've been stellar captains.
Right. No, that's really well put, Ruchira. Let me get to the next question. And I don't know whether this is peculiar to the Asian culture. In India, definitely. There is a lot of sugar coating when you actually speak to people and give them feedback. And in your book, you've mentioned that youngsters like positive feedback. And as you get more matured, you really want more constructive and direct feedback kind of a thing. My experience has been that whenever there's any feedback given, including myself, I really struggle to give those direct, straightforward, factual feedback. It's always sugar coated that invariably once it's done, I'm not too sure that that person has really got in as to what I was trying to say. So
right.
Do you see that as a specific Asian thing? How do you overcome that? What are your thoughts?
Yes and no about the Asian thing. I've also met enough Asians, unlike you, who have had no problems being very direct and negative, who often humiliated people in a room full of others, saying that, whatever they submitted was completely crap. So I've seen that as well. And that world is changing. You can no longer do that to your people.
Right.
But, we've all seen those times where you could get away with murder and it was okay as long as you were a high performer, you could do no wrong. I've seen that. I guess we need to distill it down to what should good feedback look like, right? And the research is telling us that if you give younger folks or people who are just starting out in their journey, what we call rookies, if you give them negative feedback, it is bound to have a very disheartening or debilitating effect on them. Whereas somebody who is an expert in his or her field, someone who's been there and done that, this feedback can be a little more specific. So you can, because they have now the maturity to absorb what you call not so positive feedback, right? Telling an ace tennis player that, oh, you could have done this slightly better doesn't do anything. But if you tell the individual, you could have turned the racket slightly, or you could have, when you get more specific with experts, they get it. It's not to say that they don't take it personally sometimes, but they need that level of detail to be able to improve. But what researchers and experts are now telling us is what should constructive feedback look like, in fact, across the board. What should you be telling people? Specific is great, but you should try and show people moments when they did a fantastic job. So it's like saying, Sanjoy, remember the time when you had that client presentation, when you were talking about Tag8 and its virtues, you were so articulate. Can you replicate that for the next client meeting? And that's it. So if you can showcase those moments of brilliance, or those moments where somebody did something fantastic, that's great feedback. Rather than telling people what they didn't do right or what they could do differently, show them where they excelled, and that spurs action. That gives them the confidence to move forward because they are capable of doing it. They just need to get that confidence back. They just need you to remind them of the times when those were the glorious times, I guess, for the lack of a better word. And a lot of coaches do that now. They should replay matches. They pinpoint exactly those moments when somebody has done a fantastic job.
That's an outstanding takeaway. I think I really liked that part of it. That actually leads me to the next bit around the startup segment. And, when I started, actually, I picked up the book. I thought it was more to do with a much larger organization. And you have discussed how coaching also is equally relevant. And I think the reason I was coming from that is because of the churn in the startup organization.
Yeah.
You really, and the speed with which everything happens around you, you seldom get the time to sit down and think through and, get stuff.
Agreed.
Because every day you're firefighting. If you could talk about the importance of coaching in a startup environment, that would be very useful.
Absolutely. So honestly, Sanjoy, when I started writing the book, in fact, the brief from Penguin was it should be a book for somebody who's an aspiring manager or a senior manager, and it should aid somebody who leads a large team as well. But as you start decoding what coaching is, right? Let's define it. It's helping somebody maximize his or her potential and performance through a series of self-enabling and non-directive conversations. The keywords being self-enabling and non-directive, right? When you transpose that to different contexts, you realize actually coaching can be a life skill. It's for anybody, whether you're a gig worker, you're a freelancer, especially someone who's, an entrepreneur starting out a new venture. Because what is coaching really? It is the ability to make somebody a better version of himself or herself. When you do that, when you coach someone, you enable them, you also create more bandwidth for yourself, right? As an entrepreneur who's struggling, you're fighting fires. There's the day-to-day work takes over. There's budgets to be looked at. There's new product launches. You want to look at the new and shiny, and yet you have to keep things. You have to keep the engines turning. How do you do this? So my philosophy is very simple. Unless you really coach and build these people, you'll never get the bandwidth to be more strategic. And it's something you need to make time for. But does that mean you have to block 30 minutes in the calendar and say, sit down in a formal conference room conversation? Right. No, these are moments that can happen in corridors, what we call the proverbial water cooler conversations. These happen in a long drive when you're stuck in Mumbai or in places like Chennai where the traffic is not moving. Right. These are coaching moments. You have to seize those moments. And they could be as simplistic as, what are we going to do about the supply of, let's say, XYZ? Right. But the question is, you're not giving somebody answers. You're helping the individual find answers. Right. And let's face it, sometimes you don't have the answers. The beauty of coaching is that you can be vulnerable, that you can say, I don't have all the answers, but we can find those answers together. And that's what coaching is all about. I've talked about the Epigamia story. Right. And Rohan went on to tell me that he was so inspired by his own coach, right? He had an executive coach, and he said, she made me understand that the biggest job or the biggest sort of outcome of his coaching sessions was it gave him greater clarity. And so every time he says somebody comes knocking on my door, for starters, my door is open. I know the startup culture is like you scream across corridors. Yeah. Everybody's in one large space. And he said people will walk in and they know that they can come to me with a problem, but they need to have a solution as well. I'm not saying the solution is perfect, but you can't come to me and say, what am I going to do about this? You come to me with a question, but you also come to me with some possible scenarios. And together we will try and get to a solution. Right or wrong, doesn't matter, but come up with something.
That's an excellent point. And I think especially for startup entrepreneurs who are watching this, I would strongly recommend to read that bit wherein you discuss this entire discussion on Epigamia. And that would really be very useful to all of them.
Yeah, I think one thing also to understand is we somehow believe coaching has to be this vertical thing where it's top down. In your world, there isn't that much top down. Right. We're all pretty much on the same level playing field. Right. It can be peer-to-peer coaching. You can coach each other. This is just, we have to stop thinking about the word coaching as these formal sit-down conversations, where you're trying to find solve life's problems. It's not that. It's really working together. It's helping each other become a better version of himself or herself, be more capable, have more clarity, be more self-aware, right? And have more confidence to go forward. So it doesn't have to be a boss subordinate relationship. It could be peer-to-peer, it could be colleagues. And oftentimes I tell a lot of entrepreneurs, seek external support. Mm-hmm. If you feel that you need that executive coach to supplement those efforts, because remember, you're at the top of the pyramid. Unlike a CEO who might get the board or you need an unbiased, non-judgmental
Right.
individual that you can have that conversation with. So get yourself that coach, so
Right.
that somebody can help you tap those reservoirs of potential.
In fact, talking of the coach, and before we end, the one example that I really, really liked was around Gautam Gambhir and coach Paddy Upton. If you could, talk about that specific thing, I thought that was a great takeaway from the book.
So I liked Gautam Gambhir's example a lot myself, which is why I included it, despite having a lot of content in this. So, let's just rewind a bit. One of the things that I really wanted to do for anybody reading the book was to understand what coaching does for you, right? What is the outcome? Mm-hmm. And we often use terms like, and I've been using them myself, unleash potential, make someone a better version of himself or herself, make you more. What does that really mean? So you have to sort of decode that. When you coach somebody, what is it that you should expect to give that individual, right? And we distilled it down to, I guess, what I call the 4 cornerstones model. So the 4 C's, like a good academic, you need to put in a model in a book. And the first C stands for clarity. It's perhaps one of the biggest sort of responsibilities as a leader coach, is to give the individual the clarity, right? The book cover, that's what it is, right? It's the spaghetti that is unfurling, right? You unraveling it, untangling it. So you're giving some individual clarity. Yeah. And I had I give them such a hard time, the graphic designers, because we couldn't get it right beyond that. And I kept saying, that's not enough. Even a therapist can do that for you. It's not just clarity. It's also going higher, right? That's what coaching does. It makes you more capable, right? It gives you clarity. It makes you more capable. What this whole thing is about, shining brighter. It makes you creative and more innovative. And the other thing it does for you is it gives you consciousness, right? The blind spots that we all have, what we don't know about ourselves. That's what a good coach does for you. So capability, consciousness, confidence, and clarity. Those are the things. Now, as I was trying to look at, examples from different sort of genres, films, performing arts, sport, I saw Paddy Upton, he was a coach of the T20 cricket team. He had very eloquently talked about his role in giving clarity to some of the key players. And he came in and said, I was listening to this podcast where he says he realized that as an outsider, someone who's not Indian, who didn't know the cultural nuances, he was very clear. He wasn't going to come in and tell them what to do. These are players who are clearly in the cricket team, in the national team. So they know a thing or two about cricket, right? You don't come and tell them what's going wrong. You have to help them find the answer yourself. And he describes this example of Gautam Gambhir, who was struggling. He wanted to get this, this perfect straight drive. He wanted to perfect his straight drive. And the interesting thing was, sometimes he would get it right and sometimes he wouldn't. And he was completely baffled because he couldn't figure out why he couldn't get that shot. Now, please don't quiz me on what a straight drive is, but I'm just telling you the story. And apparently, a lot of experts were sent to him. A lot of gurus were sent. The gurus dispensed a lot of gyan and said, do it like this, do it like that. But nothing was working. And so when Paddy was called, Paddy said to Gautam, listen, the answer lies inside you. You need to go deeper. You need to introspect and you need to reflect, and it'll come to you. So for starters, every time he would practice, he would tell, like the example I gave you about feedback, every time he got it right, what did he do differently? And through a whole process of trial and error and different iterations, Gautam came up with this interesting sort of idea that every time he looked down at his foot twice before hitting that shot, the shot was perfect. Now, honestly, there is no logical explanation for this. It's not a technical explanation. This is his story. This is how his muscles and neurons connected at that point to give you that perfect shot. And nobody could have found that answer for him except himself. So what Paddy did for him was help him find that clarity. The answer lies inside, right? These thoughts become very big knots. You're helping untangle them. You have the answers within. That's what a coach is doing.
No, I think this is a fabulous story. It just is so deep on it. And we have discussed that in one of the discussions earlier about there being no secret sauce to it from Kung Fu Panda, which is a movie I liked too. This I really found as an outstanding story. And to everyone watching in, as Ruchira said, I've been a bit biased about all the cricketing examples. There's loads of things that are there to be found from there. And she spent most of the time actually talking about various companies and what they have done. So even a book is lesser prescriptive and more actually helping you open up your mind and letting you think about various things that people are doing and how that could potentially help you. So that's the way I read the book, really. So I thought you've written it in a very coaching style, then being a guru saying that this is how you coach, kind of a thing, which is another thing that I really liked about it. But thanks so much, Ruchira. This has been absolutely fascinating.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the ability to speak with you today. It was fantastic.